Throughout their life in the Order, each Jedi went through different ranks as they matured and developed their skills. When they were first brought to the temple as infants, young Jedi were referred to as younglings or initiates. During the second stage of their training, they were called Padawan, and the young Jedi apprenticed under a Jedi Knight or Master who would complete their training. When a Jedi was finally deemed ready, they would be promoted to the rank of Jedi Knight, at which point they truly became Jedi. The rank of Master went one step further to acknowledge the Jedi as truly powerful and wise. But how did Jedi rank up? To become a Padawan, initiates had to undergo a decade of extensive training in the Jedi Academy before sitting their initiate trials. Even these, however, were built off the curriculum they had been studying for 10 years. Becoming a Knight was much harder, becoming a Master even more so. Jedi had to prove they were ready for the responsibilities their new rank entailed. As Knights, Jedi could take students of their own and served as full representatives of the Jedi Order. It was not a rank that could be risked on someone that wasn't ready for it. In today's video, we're going to discuss how Jedi earned their promotion to Jedi Knights or Master.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Throughout one's Padawan training, it was the Master's responsibility to ensure their student was taught everything they would need to succeed as a Jedi, from lightsaber techniques and force abilities to philosophy, culture, and diplomacy. Once the Master considered their Padawan ready, usually around the time they were a young adult, they could initiate the process to promote them to Jedi Knight. This was done through a series of 5 tests called the Trials of Knighthood. Each trial tested the Padawan on a different aspect of Jedihood. If a Padawan passed them all, they proved they were ready for the difficult life of a Jedi Knight. These trials were usually organized by the student's master, but they were taken in random order. Also, Padawans weren't warned in advance about most of the trials, since some required secrecy to be a true test. The first of these 5 trials was the Trial of Skill, which tested a Padawan's performance with a lightsaber. It wasn't just a physical test, however. While testing the student's skill with the saber, Masters also took note of their ability to maintain self-discipline while distracted. In the Order's history, the Trial of Skill took many forms, including balancing on the tip of a wooden staff and keeping a single pebble suspended while standing in the vortex of a howling Tythonese storm. If it took the form of a duel, they were tasked with fighting one or multiple other Jedi, even council members. These challenges weren't designed to be unfair, and victory wasn't necessary for a Padawan to pass. They were only intended as a test of how well the Padawan responded to the physical challenge, since being able to think through pain was a crucial skill for a Jedi Knight. The second trial, the Trial of Flesh, had a similar goal. It tested the student's ability to endure great pain, mental or physical. In the past, Jedi were known to subject their Padawan to all sorts of torment, like extreme temperatures, cuts, low-powered blaster bolts, or electric shocks. If they didn't have to, however, they chose to avoid actively hurting their students. If while on assignment or a battlefield, a Padawan received an injury and continued to fight despite the pain, their master could take that as a successfully passed trial. As the Order evolved, other types of pain, such as the pain of loss, were added to the trial's repertoire for a more nuanced test. The remaining 3 trials all took a similar approach in that they all tested the Padawan's mind and perception. The Trial of Courage, as the name suggests, tested a Padawan's resolve to fight on despite fear or doubt, and to measure their courage when caught up in a fight they knew they might lose. A Jedi too afraid to confront injustice, after all, was no true Jedi at all. Naturally, given the nature of this trial, the Padawan couldn't know about it beforehand. What kind of a test would it be if they knew they were being tested? For example, a Padawan might have passed this trial if they stayed behind to cover a unit's retreat or took on a powerful enemy. That said, Masters were expected to not intentionally put their students' lives at risk, so no yeeting the Padawan at the first Sith and hoping for the best. As a final note, courage and recklessness weren't the same thing. A Padawan that showed overconfidence or that kept fighting out of pride or hatred wasn't considered to have passed the trial. Their motivation was just as important as their perseverance. Another important skill Jedi needed to succeed was the ability to see through lies and deception. That's exactly what the Trial of Insight tested. So it was incredibly important for Jedi Knights to be able to tell the truth from lies and recognize things like illusions and misdirection. Similarly to the Trial of Courage, the Padawan couldn't know about this in advance, since that would defeat the purpose. It was also possible for this trial to be incorporated into another depending on circumstances. The final trial, however, was by far the most important. This was the Trial of Spirit, and it tested a Jedi's conviction in the Jedi Order's principles and beliefs. Being a Jedi was far more than facing a Sith and using the Force. It was about cultivating a certain outlook on life and adhering to the Jedi's core principles. This trial was also known as Facing the Mirror, as it tested the Padawan's character and, more specifically, whether or not they could set aside their personal desires, needs, or their bonds with others to fulfill their duty as a Jedi. In other words, Padawan were called to resist temptation and demonstrate that their priority was their duty above all else. Traditionally, this trial was carried out under deep, guided meditation, with the Master conducting it, guiding the Padawan's mind down the path most likely to test them. One example of such a moral dilemma could have been, for example, whether a Jedi would leave behind a critically injured loved one, such as a friend of their own master, if it was the only way to complete their mission. Another example could be resisting their deepest desires, such as thirst for revenge or yearning for romantic love. To pass this trial, the Padawan had to prove they could control their emotions. They had to demonstrate they could accept grief, shame, hate, or any other emotion that's centered on the self. It wasn't uncommon for students to feel disturbed after, since they were confronted with their deepest struggles. That was what made this trial so important though. A Jedi who gave into their emotions was easy to waylay. Just look at two excellent examples from the Clone Wars, Anakin Skywalker and Pong Krell. Both fell to the dark side, lured by their hidden fears. Of course, this trial also had to be kept secret. An important detail to note here is that, although these trials could all be planned out by the Master and conducted in a controlled environment, any experience the Padawan had in the field that could qualify could count as a completed trial. As mentioned above, facing a Sith could count toward multiple trials, like the trials of flesh and courage. The trials of insight and spirit were also closely linked. When the Padawan completed all 5 trials, they were promoted to a Jedi Knight. After completing the trials, they became full Jedi Knights after going through the knighting ceremony. This was an ancient ritual carried out by members of the High Council and led by the Order's Grand Master. To start, the Padawan was told the date of the ceremony. The day before, they were told to meditate in isolation. On the day of the ceremony, they were summoned to the Hall of Knighthood. The chamber within was dark and the Padawan was instructed to kneel in the center. Around them, Jedi Masters formed a solemn circle and ignited their sabers, pointing the blades toward the kneeling Padawan. The only person that spoke was the Grand Master. Stepping in, they lowered their lightsaber to just above each of the Padawan's shoulders, speaking the ancient words of the ritual. We are all Jedi. The Force speaks through us. Through our actions, the Force proclaims itself and what is real. Today, we are here to acknowledge what the Force has proclaimed. As those words were spoken, the Grand Master cut off the student's Padawan braid and set it on the floor before them, completing the ritual with the final ceremonial phrase. By the right of the Council, by the will of the Force, I dub thee Jedi, Knights of the Republic. With that, the ceremony was concluded. The new Jedi Knight retrieved their cut-off braid and left in silence. Once a Jedi became a Knight, they were expected to spend years at that rank, learning, growing, and honing their skills. There wasn't a specific timeline to achieving the rank of Jedi Master, but there were 2 ways a Jedi could be promoted. The first was also the simplest, in a way. All the Jedi had to do was train a Padawan until they reached the rank of Knight. Now, we say simplest, but this was by no means an easy task. Training a Padawan could take more than a decade, and it involved a huge transfer of knowledge. They had to hone their saber skills and Force abilities and teach them about politics, cultures, diplomacy through real-world experience. More than that, they had to teach their Padawan how to be good Jedi and develop that mentality until they were able to pass their trials. That was basically why this was an automatic promotion for the teacher as well. If a Jedi could nurture a young mind enough to pass their trials, they were considered wise enough to be a master. The Knight trials were a test of the teacher as much as the student. Not all Jedi were suited for teaching, however. Some worked best alone, or some had professions that simply didn't pair well with toting a young student around, such as the Jedi Shadows that hunted the Sith. These Jedi weren't barred from ever becoming masters, however. Instead of elevating a Padawan, they had the option of undertaking modified Knight trials that tested the same principles, but at a much higher level. If they passed, they could become Jedi Masters. If becoming a Jedi Knight was an important event, becoming a Master was an incredible occasion. The title was only given to those Jedi that had proved themselves to be wise, dependable Jedi that had control over their hearts and conviction in their beliefs. They represented the best of the Order, and giving the rank to someone just for being powerful would have undermined what being a Master meant. It wasn't a rank that represented skill, but wisdom. That's precisely why Anakin Skywalker was never promoted to the rank of Master. He was a knight of prodigious skill, and no one ever doubted that, but it was easy to see that he had darkness in him that controlled him more so than he controlled it. The Jedi Council made many mistakes in the long history of the Jedi Order, but denying Anakin the rank of Master was not one of them. When a knight was promoted, they underwent a modified version of the knighting ceremony. And there you have it. What do you think the Council were thinking when they denied Anakin a promotion? Was it because of what they saw in him, or were they just being difficult witches for the sake of it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.